I've always been an avid conservative when it comes to the Constitution and original intent and all of those things.
Yep.
And so,
which is out the window these days.
Well, it is out the window these days.
Wow.
From both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so I was on town council here in Prosperity and doing some things that I've always looked at the sense of being involved, because I think as a citizen, it's our duty.
Amen.
That's what we're supposed to do.
No doubt.
For a republic to work, you have to have citizens willing to step up and be involved. So I got involved in a local level, planning commission, board of zoning appeals, which I loved. It was nothing better than board of zoning appeals.
You changed the county. I give you a lot of credit for changing the county. We had a county council that thought all the money's theirs. And until you stood up in that gymnasium in Newberry College and ripped that property tax, I was in there. The place was packed, and it really changed the direction of our county. I think it. This may be overstating. I don't think it is though. It was 2010 that this county first voted conservative for the first time since Reconstruction. First time, Mulvaney for a congressional race. It had been in Democrat hands since Reconstruction ended. And Mulvaney won that seat, and county council followed. And I think the seeds you planted, Mike, were a lot of that. When people started paying attention, going, wait a minute, what are we spending this money on? Is this government's responsibility or is it mine? So
the issue that we're talking about is the property tax, and the county had been negligent in its duty because they have to do a state law reassessment every 5 years. Well, they hadn't reassessed in almost 15 years.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, people's property taxes were double, triple. There was ladies that were living in tiny little homes on Lake Murray where properties were $500,000 properties. They built a home in the 1950s, a little concrete block house on a little lot that was, when it was built, it was nothing. Nobody wanted to live on the lake in the 50s that much. And all of a sudden, their property, one woman's property taxes quintupled on her.
I remember.
And
in a year, property taxes.
Boom, just like that.
It about ran them out of their houses.
Oh, some of them it almost did. And so we had a big meeting at the Newberry Opera House. And they were sitting there, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to deal with it? And they voted to, yes, we are going to go through with this. And I just had a wild hair, and I just couldn't help it.
It was great.
I just walked down with my property tax bill, and I just looked up and said, there is something we can do. I just held it up, and
Mike, I've told that story.
Erupted.
I've told that story nationally. When I talk about people standing up, I've got a litany of people that I'll point to as examples in different parts. And my buddy Mike Bedenbaugh did this about property taxes. And if we're not, to me, it's the most communistic tax. You save, you earn, you risk, you protect, you take care of. Oh, it's worth X dollars, and we get to pay for it. I think it is right in Marx's. It's right out of Marx's writings.
It's been something. Well, that's true, but it has been something that's been part of American tradition forever.
Absolutely, but it's been misused. It's most proper. It's the biggest thing that's misused by government entities.
Well, it is.
You stood up to it.
Well, it is, and so because of that, because the news that came about it, I got appointed to a board that was trying to eradicate the property taxes. A group out of Charleston. I was on that group, and what came out of that, and the public pressure out of that group I was involved in, got the property tax changed to where homeowners had theirs reduced by 50% with a 1 cent sales tax.
Yep.
But then they kept it on the 6% assessment for businesses, which I thought was the biggest sin, because they say they want to help it, but all that does is put the burden of property taxes on rental properties and who rents properties.
Right.
So and I was furious, and I left the group, because I'm like, unless we can put this as a sales tax or figure out a better way. Now, there's a legitimate concern, and I know how you feel about government school, but there is a legitimate concern if we were to have some form of public school where people have control over their local public school. How do you fund it? And that's how it's traditionally been funded and set up in the 1895 Constitution.
I'm actually not against that. I think we just got to be smarter, and I think it just needs competition. How do we help teachers? Let's put more money in the tax into the classroom, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think the funding mechanism is the problem. I think that there's way too much waste in the system. Way too much bureaucracy. We went from 85 school districts, we're finally down like 72 or 74 because of what Molly Spearman did. That's going to help. But every proposal that I've backed has been, let's push money to the classroom. Let's get it to the teachers. Let's make them more responsible instead of having all this bureaucracy here at the county level or the district level. So I'm not against the property taxes funding that kind of thing. What I think you did, though, is you woke people up. For the first time in my lifetime, I had gone through this epiphany in the 90s. Do I really believe what I really believe? And I had a buddy of mine. We were driving along, Mike, in Winder, Georgia. And he had his Bible in the car, and I was asking him about my Amway business. I said, Jamie, I've never seen anybody ride with their Bible. I've got one. We dust it off, but I've never seen anybody with it in the car. I grew up Methodist. It was, non-expressive, more liturgical, more perfunctory. Yep. And he said, I said, what's this got to do with business? He said, nothing but everything. Okay, now I'm really confused. And he said, have you ever read it? I said, well, I read it. Sure, I read it. He said, no, Genesis, I'll never forget this, Genesis to Maps. I said, no, I've never read it, Genesis to Maps. And he did a U-turn on Highway 78, and we went to a Christian bookstore, and he said, we're not socialists. You need to buy one. And I bought a one-year Bible. And except for the year Michelle died, I've read the Bible at least once every year since 91. And it was Jamie Nettles, and he's passed away. He died of lung cancer a few years ago. But it was one of the most important things in my life, because then I started really checking out for me, and I realized everybody's got a worldview. What dictates your worldview? And mine became dictated, is this the truth or is it not? And it was just an amazing thing. And I got to tell you, when you awaken people, that was a little bit what I went through maybe 10 years before. It made me go build my business. It made me go work on my own. It made me come out of the Army and appreciate the idea of freedom more. Mm-hmm. It made me want to be an entrepreneur. I can go down that list of things, because I stood in that gymnasium that day and watched that happen. It was a big deal.